Trump and Netanyahu have launched a campaign against Iran with maximalist aim and minimalist means. They speak the language of regime change, but the political, military, and social preconditions are not present. The result will not be transformation in Tehran, but a high-risk spiral toward open-ended war that may engulf the region and end the strategic failure. No alternative government is in waiting. Successful regime change from without requires an organized, legitimate opposition capable of stepping into the vacuum. Iran has nothing of the kind. The opposition is fragmented, mistrustful, and poorly coordinated, especially between activists inside the country and the diaspora. There is no unified command, coherent program, or agreed transitional leadership around which a national movement can rally. The 2025-26 protest, though large and courageous, lacked centralized leadership capable of translating street mobilization into an organized bid for power. Prominent figures such as Nobel laureate Narges Mohammadi are in prison, while key exiled personalities like Reza Pahlavi are rejected and unable to command nationwide allegiance. In this context, calls for Trump for Iranians to rise up are largely rhetorical. They seem to ignore the fact that authoritarian incumbents gain when contenders remain fragmented, as division and weakened coordination can strengthen the regime's endurance. Without a reliable alternative center of power, external pressure is more likely to produce internal repression than revolution. Regime change without boots on the ground. The second illusion is that air and naval power alone can topple a hardened regime and usher in a new order. Experience in Iraq and Afghanistan show that even where regimes were rapidly overthrown, the absence of sustained large-scale stabilization forces produced vacuums, insurgencies, and prolonged conflict, not liberal democracy aligned with Western preferences. Trump does not intend to deploy the kind of ground forces and long-term peace-building apparatus required to manage a post-Islamic Republic transition. Tactical objectives, destroying nuclear and missile facilities, degrading command structure, killing Syria commanders have partly been achievable. But the larger question is whether regime change is realistically realizable without a serious post-conflict plan, a sustained presence, and adequate resources. A system built to survive decapitation. Third, Trump and Netanyahu appear to assume that killing Syria leaders or striking key nods will fatally disorient the regime. Iran has spent years preparing to prove them wrong. Khomeini established a four-layered replacement framework for critical military and governmental posts designed to prevent paralysis if top officials are killed in war. This structure empowers a narrow cadre of trusted officials with autonomous decision-making authority under wartime conditions or communications breakdowns, ensuring continuity of commands and control. The Islamic Republic's constitutional and clerical architecture was designed to outlast any single figure. Institutions such as the Assembly of Experts, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and an extensive internal security apparatus can collectively reconstitute leadership even after decapitation strikes. Succession planning aimed to ensure that even after the death of Khomeini, the system remains stable, operational, and viable. Decapitation may satisfy political appetites in Washington and Jerusalem, but it will not collapse the state. The missing preconditions for regime change. Beyond these structural obstacles, core prerequisites of successful regime change are absent. Durable transition requires a broad cross-class coalition that bridges urban middle classes, workers, and peripheral regions. There is a little evidence of systematic IRGC or Benzi fragmentation. The coercive organs of the state remain cohesive and effective, and its capacity for repression remains undiminished, sharply constraining the likelihood that calls for rise up will translate into regime change. Despite a deep economic crisis, Tehran can still fund its security services and regional network, preserving its ability to coerce at home and deter abroad. Historical cases suggest that regimes tend to fall not when they are merely weakened, but when ruling elite splits. Current reporting emphasizes coordination rather than open fissures, and citizens are unlikely to strike unless they know that the prospect of success outweighs the risks. 4 strategic miscalculations. All of this feeds into 4 interlocking miscalculations by Trump and Netanyahu. First, they have misjudged the regime's resolve in the face of attack. Trump and Netanyahu calculated that calibrated strikes and coercive diplomacy would force Tehran to abandon its nuclear enrichment program, missiles, and regional red lines. Iranian leaders, however, have repeatedly stated a willingness to absorb significant punishment, but will never capitulate. Second, they have misread the interaction between nationalism and regime change. External assault tend to consolidate, not erode, core support for the state. It activates rally around the flag dynamics that allow the leadership to suppress dissent while casting itself as a guardian of national dignity against foreign aggression. Third, they have overestimated the opposition's readiness to capitalize on shocks. Recurrent protests were interrupted as near pre-revolutionary, when in reality the opposition remained divided and the state has developed calibrated repression, selective concessions, and information control that manages unrest without systematic breakdown. Finally, both Trump and Netanyahu succumb to the illusion of control over escalations. They appear to believe they can escalate militarily, severely degrade Iranian capabilities, and still prevent uncontrolled regional war or major retaliation. Tehran has repeatedly warned that any existential threat to the regime or its core programs will trigger a broad, systematic response. The current campaign has already triggered a wider conflict it purports to deter. Netanyahu's window of vulnerability and its limits. Netanyahu's reported argument to Trump rests on and ostensibly compelling readings. Iran's air defenses are weaker, its axis of resistance has lost ground in Syria, its economy is sluggish, public unrest is simmering. In his view, Iran is weaker than it has ever been, and now is the moment to strike. This analysis is only half right. Iran's air defense, regional posture, and economy have indeed faced strains. But these setbacks have not erased the core pillars of regime survival: a cohesive security apparatus, a resilient missiles and drone deterrent, a deep state that can absorb leadership losses, and an opposition unable to capitalize on regime vulnerabilities. Trump, for his part, has failed to answer two basic policy questions: why attack Iran and why now? His public justification relies on imminent threats posed by Iran's nuclear and missile programs and its proxies. Yet, subsequent briefings reportedly conceded there was no evidence Tehran was about to strike first. The campaign, therefore, looks less like self-defense than preventive war, launched on the assumption that a weakened Iran would crumble under pressure. That assumption is not supported by political or strategic realities inside the Islamic Republic. A policy path away from arrogance. The lesson is clear. Rhetorics about regime change should be dropped, and objectives should be narrowed to realistic, defensible aims, deterrence, containment, and verifiable limits on Iran's most dangerous activities. Continuing down the current path risks repeating the worst failures of past regime change adventures. The United States and Israel do not have to like the regime in Tehran, but they do have to reckon somberly with its resilience and craft policy accordingly. They must seek a ceasefire and resume negotiations. Iran's foreign minister clearly stated that his country is ready once the United States and Israel end their hostilities.